So welcome to my talk. Um, I am Director of Cloud Strategies, SRE, and DevOps. 30 years of building software, and delivering it and maintaining and operating software for trading companies, supply chain systems, retail payment systems. So a lot of experience in building and delivering application software. And so I come at security very much from an application-centric point of view. What do I as a developer really need to take into account for security? How do I deliver a product that's trustworthy and reliable and doesn't page me in the middle of the night and doesn't have great big, oh my gosh, what's going on with this kind of problems? So that's the way this talk is structured. It was inspired by a quote that was on the Breaking Down Security podcast, which you should check out. By the way, if you want to follow along with my presentation on as I talk along, you can click on that link, tcbtech.com/awesome. That will bring you to the slides for this presentation as well as the speaker notes. So you can follow along and look through the particular diagrams and so forth with me. But this talk was inspired by a comment that was made on the Breaking Down Security podcast. Teams want to work on awesome features. Development teams want to work on awesome features, not security. But what they don't realize is that security is an awesome feature. It's an awesome product feature. And that's what I'm here to do, is to help you frame the conversation with your development teams that are developing software in your organization as a product feature that brings value to the product, brings value to the organization. So I'm an agile software developer. I've been doing methods like Scrum and Kanban since before those terms were developed or applied to software development. And one of the things that I've tried to do over time is make sure that the software that I build is trustworthy. Trustworthy myself. That is, can I actually run this software and not get woken up in the middle of the night, not have managed huge risks from it? But how do I do that? And what are the capabilities? Which is how I got into security in the first place, was that I realized that a lot of the software that I was working with needed much better security controls than I was understood at the time in the 90s. And so learned a lot about security and went from there. So let's talk about awesome, the word awesome. So it's used twice in this quote that inspired me. And so I went and looked it up and said, what is awesome? Why is that term compelling? Why does it apply in this context? And really it is about a comparative, or comparing something to the other. So this thing is awesome, so it's better than something else. And that's sort of the crux of the discussion today, is how do we make comparison about product features and get them into the discussion so that as we're looking at developing and building a product, we're taking into account the security features as first order product features. So again, I come at this from the viewpoint of an agile delivery methodology, an agile practitioner, a software developer who does agile systems. And so very much at the fundamental process of what we're doing is DevOps or DevSecOps. That diagram at the lower left-hand side there is the Gartner diagram about how to do DevSecOps, which I think is, I like the term DevSecOps, but really that gets kind of complicated. The more you start talking about security, the more that you get complicated diagrams and complicated guidance on how to move forward. And I prefer to think of security much more in a straightforward, simpler way. Empowered teams that are empowered to build your enterprise software or to build your product software should be empowered to deliver the business value that you want from that software. And so they need to be they need to have the right set of tools and the right set of capabilities and the right permissions and the right roles to do that. And they need to go from an idea of, here's some software that's going to help us, and get that delivered either as a product or as a running piece of software in your organization. So there's planning that needs to be done: build, test, deploy, monitor, using continuous integration tool sets, using using DevOps, using automation to deliver this, so that they're highly productive and can focus on the things that humans do best, which is being creative, as opposed to the things that machines do best, which is following the plan and deploying software and monitoring hundreds of different software systems that are deployed, that build this, pieces of software that are deployed to build this holistic system. So empowered teams they have the capabilities and the resources at their grasp, whether it's part of their team or other teams that they can rely on to manage the entire process. But fundamentally, the process is very simple. So, and this is, the diagram here with the 5 stages is kind of built on the OODA loop that was developed by the fighter pilots in the US military. And the OODA loop is observe, orient, decide, and act. And that simple process in a very complex battlefield situation with a multi-million-dollar, $100 million airplane is the straightforward nature of how to react and respond to your environment. And so software developers need to do much the same thing. So I like the diagram that's on the right, which is a straightforward, simpler diagram. Anyhow, this is all about, though, delivering business value in the simplest, most straightforward way possible. And what we want to do is to describe that value in ways that allow development teams to make decisions that allow them to prioritize security requirements. And so there are many different frameworks that development teams will use to prioritize the features that they're going to put in their product. And we'll talk about some of those that help teams see that the security features that you want to talk about, the security aspects of a system that as a security team you want to see delivered, add value to their product. And so these are roughly the 4 categories that we're gonna talk about. Relative value of security features versus other features, monetary methods, how to come up with a monetary framework so that the security features can be prioritized in and amongst the other, say, revenue generating features of a product. Checklists of different frameworks that you can use to say, you've got to do all of these things. And then frameworks that allow you to do modeling around this security features that you want. How does the model of your system incorporate the security pieces that belong in this particular product? So we'll talk about how these different methods of framing value help you have a discussion with your development teams to make sure that security is addressed properly. Relative valuations is simply taking a look at the product features and then looking at what has to be, from a security perspective, what has to be in your product. And so this relative valuations tend to be, I think, more, they're relative. So there's a lot of give and play here. There's not a fact-driven platform that you can go with. This is much more a gut check kind of, where does security fit in gut check wise compared to the feature to have a particular button do something in the product. So but there's some things about relative value that's kind of helpful. Like, you might have regulatory mandates. If you're building a system that is dealing with credit cards, you've got, you can't do this unless you're signing the agreement with your card holder, your card processing bank to do the following things. So there's contractual agreements here. There are regulatory requirements if you're dealing with healthcare information, if you're dealing with financial information. these are mandates, right? You can't get away from addressing these things. They're important requirements, which sort of, everybody knows. Using TLS and up-to-date cipher suites, I noticed that, the browsers have been working diligently over the past 2 years to really remove older crypto choices out of your manuals. The big change from TLS 1.1 to 1.2 is just removing a lot of the cipher suite choices that were available. Using OAuth as a strong way of doing the authentication between systems, enabling multi-factor authentication in the systems. I mean, it still surprises me that my bank thinks that multi-factor authentication is somehow a text message to my cell phone, and not using an actual multi-factor app like a YubiKey or something else. Encrypting data wherever you can, at rest, in transit, et cetera. Setting up session timeouts. So, banks have gotten fairly good at saying, basically, if you're inactive for 15 minutes, you're going to be logged out. But there are other places where timeouts last longer. It's, for various reasons, Amazon will keep you logged in for a very, very long time because it's in their best interest to make sure that you can check out that on one click, right? And whether it's you or somebody who's wandered across your logged in session at the library, that's, what are the correct session timeouts? What are the correct session timeouts for your product? And, there are lots of advice and guidance that you can do here and figure that out. But again, it's a gut check for your product. What makes sense for your product? And nice to haves. Well, so I threw in application firewall as a nice to have, but there's, some of you on this call will say, well, but an application firewall is a must have. It's above important requirements. It's in a hard requirement. That may be the case, but your product team may feel differently, that application firewall is somehow preventing them from doing work, or they don't have the time to implement it. And their gut says it's more important to add a new feature that's going to draw in more users than it is to build an application firewall to protect this product. So having a relative value discussion here is probably the most difficult way to talk to your development team. So there are more factual driven ways to go have a team that allows this discussion to be on firmer ground. Monetary evaluation is one way to do this. And so in particular, like, what does it cost if something goes wrong? And so the 2021 IBM Ponmon is excellent for gathering this data and delivering it and sending it out in terms of cost of a data breach. I don't know that their 2022 report is available yet. So these figures come through come from the 2021 report. And if you look in the speaker notes, you'll find the various pages that I've taken these particular amounts from. But when you go to your product development team and you say, look, you're spending $10 million to develop this product, or you're spending, our project budget is $2 million for this piece of enterprise software. And then you come with a piece of paper that says, hey, look, by the way, if there's a breach here, this is what it's going to cost you. And that number is, twice the size of the project that cost, or it's half the project cost for this product. That can be a real attention grabber, right? Getting, the full lifetime cost of a user of your system. They might bring in, over the life of the system, $100,000 in revenue. And the cost of acquisition is $10,000 to bring that customer in. And if you go tell them, yeah, if you add this feature and it's broken, by the way, the lifetime value of that customer is going to go from $100,000 to $2.4 million in the negative, plus that $100,000. So you're $4.14 million in the hole. Like, that's a discussion that your product teams and your product owners will listen to. You can talk about the average cost of a lost record and do some multiplication to show that a cost of a breach, a cost of a security, of leaving out a security feature, not putting in that application firewall that we talked about, could cost a lot of money. That application firewall that might detect an accidental SQL injection attack that's blocked by that firewall, that prevents a data breach, that prevents hundreds of thousands of records of being released at $180 a record, right? So this is a great way to have this discussion. However, this sort of discussion can also be abused in terms of the way that it's done. I was listening to a security podcast, and one of the CISOs was basically saying that anytime a product development team pushed back on a security feature that her security team wanted to have implemented in the product, she would just whip out the GDPR fine amounts. 20 million euros is the minimum fine for whatever security feature. And while that's a really big number, it's also a number that is impossible to sort of describe, to put in terms of the product feature. And so because that number is so far out of whack with, say, a $2 million product to put into the field, because that $20 million trumps it by an order of magnitude, they just ignore it. Like, yeah, sure, you can say that, but it doesn't matter here. So you don't want to bring this out and just basically have the security team shut it down because they're building a product, they've already been funded, and now you come along with this big honking number that they don't really care about. And so what they do is they politely nod their heads and they wait till you leave the conference room or sign off the Zoom call, and end of discussion, they go back to doing what they were doing anyway. So it's important to recognize how to have these conversations and to scale these numbers in ways that make sense to your development team, which probably means talking more, building up more from the average, cost of a record loss. Assume that the number of records lost might be a smaller number that's fathomable by the group, and then have this discussion about ways to prevent that. You're concerned that if you fire up a web application firewall on Amazon, that's costing you $400 a month in addition to the other costs on here, but we can show that the payback for that is reducing the risk of the likelihood of a breach this way, and therefore that $400 is a net win, and our organization can support you on that by taking the time to build that out. So that's a better way to approach this and use these numbers as a discussion point. There are checklists. So this Gartner report, Gartner is a very well-respected organization, giving lots of good advice to people. They have multiple lists on security. So this 12 things to get right, I think, was from 2019, a 2019 report there. The link is in the speaker notes if you're following along in the presentation there. This is common. There are a number of different sets of checklists from this 12 things, which is kind of fathomable, to much longer lists like the NIST SP 800 series of controls, and I think SP 863 has got like 106 controls at my last check. Going through a list like that of 106 things that you have to add to your product feature, when the product backlog may only have 50, 60 features in it, and then you come in with a checklist. Here's the NIST SP 863 checklist. Here's 160 things you've got to add to your product before you can release it. Is a great way, again, to get development teams to sort of nod their heads and wait till you leave the room, and then they're going to go back and do what they want to do. But this is, there's some authority behind having the NIST give you a set of features, the PCI card industry giving you a set of features, Gartner telling you these are the things that you need to do. There's some authority behind there, so it's not just you in the room. It's important industry experts. It's a great way to have a discussion, but it's also some way, you have to use that again in moderation and make sure that you can use that to get level set and get the attention of the team, but then not shut them down because you're carrying too much weight that they can't carry it. So another approach that I've used in the past that was very helpful is the OWASP OpenSAMM security model. So you're familiar with the OWASP top 10, which is a great place to start in terms of just sort of remediating starting with teams that haven't really thought about security, the OWASP top 10, here are things that you should do. Have you thought about these things? Do you know what SQL injection is? Does your tool, does your security lifecycle, your software development lifecycle, does it take into account how to check for and remediate these top 10 things? That's a great tool. The lesser known project at OWASP is the OpenSAMM model, which stands for Security Assurance and Maturity Matrix model. So it goes through, it's fairly complex. So in terms of, again, I think when you, each one of these boxes here, each one of the 15 boxes here has like 4 or 5 different components on it. So, 15 times 5 is a pretty big number, pretty big laundry list of maturity model processes that you want in your software development lifecycle. So it can be overwhelming, but at least it's got a lot of, good advice on things that you should be doing. It also is a little bit more on telling you what you should be doing and a little less on helpful advice around how to go about do that. How do you do an architectural assessment is not something that's in the OpenSAMM model, but it is telling you that you've got to go do that. So this is where you can start off with a development team and say, look, here's a maturity model that will get you farther along. When you're looking at a particular thing like secure deployment or an architectural assessment, come talk to us. Like, if you don't know how to do that architectural assessment, if you don't know how to do that piece, come talk to us, because we as security professionals can guide you through that. We'll help you have that discussion, frame that up. So that's this is a great tool, even though it can be daunting. You can use it as a way to, again, in moderation, talk to your teams and start that conversation and show them that you can be the collaborative, consultant for security and how to add security into their product. So these are these four different methods of talking about, relative value, checklists and frameworks, monetary. These are ways to start that discussion. But ultimately, teams that deliver, they have to make sure that they're empowered to deliver the security features that are necessary to make a product reliable. Again, my approach has been, the best software is developed by empowered teams that can move fast, agile teams that understand the business space that they're in and have the authority to solve their own problems and move forward. So they don't, when they run into a problem, they don't have to reach out to an operations team. They don't have to reach out to other teams to, set up certificates in their software. They can do that themselves. They can set up, TLS. They can encrypt the data in their database on their own. They can set up, column level encryption. They can set up storage level encryption. And they've got the capabilities in their environment to be able to do that without having to wait, file a ticket, wait 3 days for some operations team to get back to them, and then have, 3 one-hour meetings to discuss how this gets implemented, and then schedule it for a release to be had in the following month. That's down the road, right? They can encrypt the data, test it in their test environment, and later that day move that same encryption checkbox in, however they've enabled that feature, deploy that into production, monitor it tomorrow, make sure that all of their workflows are still working as possible. Their business transactions are the same. They can collaborate with other teams, and this is important. So they may not be the be all and end all of, say, looking at how the Azure SQL server in their cloud environment is configured, but they can go talk to their SRE team or their cloud DBA team and ask the question, how do we implement this backup scheme? How do we ensure that our the database is encrypted at rest? And have a consultative discussion with other teams in their organization that understand that particular area of their infrastructure much more deeply. And by being able to do that, they can move fast. And so when they recognize a security need, they can quickly prioritize that and include that in their product without having to ask for permission or schedule it for a long time ahead. They can react to those security needs. And so as you as a security practitioner, as the security analyst that is recommending things, you can talk to these teams, get the particular features prioritized, and recognize that the advice that you bring will be prioritized. And that's okay, because eventually, as things become important enough, they will get addressed. And not everything has to be addressed at once, because you can't do everything at once. So this is important to recognize that cybersecurity is a business problem. And so this again is taken, this idea is taken from a book called Fire Doesn't Innovate by Kip Boyle, who was the Chief Information Security Officer for Safeco Insurance here in Seattle. So Kip, what his point was, as an insurer and as an insurer of businesses that need business insurance, and they were looking at how do they do cybersecurity insurance, what he realized was it was very easy for them to sell insurance like fire insurance. If you've got a warehouse and you are insuring that against fire, like fire is in this century is the same as it was in the last century. Pretty much not much has changed about fire. On the other hand, the cybersecurity threat that you've got this year is totally different than it was, say, just short 2 years ago, right? The evolution, if you read if you go back and look at the Verizon data breach reports, or you look at the the various security lineage security reports, you look at a Microsoft trustworthy computing report from 10 years ago and now, like, the landscape is totally different in terms of how that works. And so what his suggestion is, the cybersecurity criminals are innovating very fast, month over month. They're innovating in the way they work. And so if you're an insurer in this business, you have a very difficult problem. But and that problem is a business problem. It's not a technology problem. It is a business problem. And how do you solve that problem? Well, the way that you respond to an evolving cybersecurity threat is through development teams that can evolve their product to mitigate those threats. And so you've got to have an empowered team that's empowered to understand their threat landscape and respond to it. And so as you do that, what you're doing is, as a cybersecurity person, you're helping that development team become much more important, much more capable, and therefore more valuable to your organization. And each of those developers becomes more valuable in terms of their capabilities. And so this is a conversation that you can have, not telling them you have to do these things because otherwise, there's grave concerns or whatever, but you can do these things. You can make your product more valuable, and you can become a better developer who brings more value to the organization. And that's the way you want to frame this conversation, is around bringing value by building a more trustworthy product. So the little pictograms there is sort of a typical sort of agile team, where you've got a product owner, a development lead, and several developers, and maybe some junior developers. And this is the team that's responsible for delivering a product, taking a product idea and building it and delivering that product to the world in the most straightforward way as possible. Plan a product increment, build that increment, deliver that increment, make sure that product increment works as expected, build that minimum viable product, make sure that you're getting the value out of that, pivot that minimum viable product into something that's different than you imagined, but your data shows that that's the features that the users are using. So enhance those features and make that product, follow what the users are doing. So, your monitoring, your business level monitoring goes into your planning phase and so forth. So this very simple process, security fits into this security process, because you can show that those features add trustworthiness, bring more users to the product, and prevent various downsides. And again, it's a business problem. Cybersecurity becomes a business problem and not just a checklist of things that people have to do. So we talk a little bit about the software supply chain. There's also a business value chain. There are lots of stakeholders that have some impact on your development team that they need to take advantage of. Starting with in the upper left there, your senior leadership team that has certain expectations about what this product is going to do and the revenue that product is going to bring. Your business owners, your product development. So you're on the senior leadership, your CIO, your vice presidents, your directors. You've got business owners, your product development teams, your product development owners, your business analysts, your project managers. They all have some say so. Your users have a significant contribution towards the types of business value you want to deliver in this product. Your SRE and operations teams that help your development team deliver the value, help them monitor and make sure that value works right. So you've got your SRE person, your tier one responder, your operations personnel, all of which are stakeholders in making sure that your system is not waking them up in the middle of the night, not over consuming resources and costing more than the value, et cetera. That it's a manageable product. And then you've got information security. So you're just one of the stakeholders. Your team is just one of the stakeholders that's involved in helping this product team, this development team deliver value. You've got your cybersecurity analyst, your pen tester, and your compliance people that have those, industry regulations or governmental regulations in order to deliver this product. So all of these people have conversations, and given that you're, as information security, competing with these others, you need to frame the way that you have that conversation to ways that are receptive and responding to the things that organization, the development team is being pushed and pulled on, and how you can bring value so that you can essentially reduce the complexity of their life, reduce the pressures on them, be helpful in ways that allow them to get their work done better, faster. So by bringing automation, by helping them with problems that they can't solve themselves and helping them solve those problems, you become a partner with this team, and you frame things in ways that they can consume the information and the support that you're bringing them. And that's the important part, is figuring out how can they consume the message that you want to receive, message you want them to receive. So my recommendation is that, systems that are built and delivered are delivered iteratively. Like if you look at the growth of just look at AWS. I mean, it started out as very few features, and they continued to iterate on the features that their customers were buying. Azure started out as features that were consumed internally in Microsoft, and then eventually were released to the outside world. Originally, it was really intended to be a platform as a service using just Microsoft, the platform of Microsoft products like .NET, delivered in platform as a service, and now it's become a fully featured, software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service. And they've incremented on that over the decade or so that they've been delivering the Azure services. So again, taking an incremental approach, starting with things that are most consumable by your development team, and getting that in the current iteration, getting that in the next thing that this team is going to release, and not try to give them the entire checklist. In your next release, you have to deal with everything that's in SP 863. Here are 106 security controls that have to be built into the next release of your system. That's a great way to stop all project work, right? That's not going to happen for another 18 months. And so whatever product they're building is going to lose an 18-month head start on the competition. So figuring out which ones of those requests are most important, which one of those security controls are most important, and get that in the next iteration and get that delivered. And even helping your team build some of the automation that's needed, the DevOps automation, taking that on and working with your SRE team, or working with the developer that's really interested in installing that Jenkins server, or maybe some other better, higher quality DevOps server. But is interested in that. We'll have a conversation with you. Get that built into the next iteration, and you can work your way as your team iterates on smaller wins around security. They become more and more capable. They become more capable to take on bigger wins around deployments and around adding bigger features, like doing container scanning, doing a full threat assessment or a risk model of their system. Is a great way to, after they've had, you've developed a working relationship on small features that they can implement. Now you can begin to expand that conversation into broader topics and bring them into the fold. Number one, they're in a position to better have that conversation with you because they understand that they can deliver security features. And two, they understand, having delivered some, what remains to be done. They begin to get a good sense of what the security landscape looks like, and therefore we'll have a broader conversation with you, and we'll start having that conversation to help, bringing you to the table to help them evaluate what security feature is next. Should we be implementing a software supply chain system, or should we be implementing OAuth on the front end? Which one of those things is more important? And you guys can help them evaluate that through a consultative approach. So, and what this boils down to is that a system is not going to be used if it's not trustworthy. And so by helping your development teams build trust into the system, you are helping that development team build a system that people will use. And I know for many years, I worked in various enterprise IT shops, and all of their development, and actually, so even working on a project now that kicked off last month, and the project manager brought out the book that said, okay, here are the non-functional requirements that we want to add to your system. And I'm like, I'm sorry, those are all functional requirements. What do you mean that these things are non-functional? We're not going to get to them all at once, and we're probably going to release well before we've addressed everything on that list. But trust me, they're important, they're functional, and we will get to them, but maybe not in the order that you think, and certainly not in a big waterfall fashion that was there before. So don't help your teams understand that, or let me put this in a different way. When you bring a big checklist, when you bring a big honking scary number, you shut down the conversation. And when you call these things non-functional requirements that must be addressed, like you've sort of, it's a contradiction in terms. These are functional requirements. And if you frame the conversation as here's everything that you've got to do before you can release, you end up essentially throwing down a gauntlet, and you put yourself in an adversarial position, and that shuts down the conversation. You need to come in a way where you're talking about application trust, the next security minimum viable security increment that you can put in your product that will make this product better, right? And let the team decide and work with them in developing a rubric, their own rubric and framework for how do you decide when you've got enough security value for your next release. And that may not be every bit of security value you'd like to see them done, but if it's better is a win. And if you use perfection, it's the enemy of getting a product out the door. So you need to construct your discussion in a way that is incremental and consumable, right? So sort of in summary, and there's still a little bit more down here, is don't boil the ocean. So working back up. So, be prepared to work iteratively. You can't come with a giant checklist. find the developer that's interested in security and work with them and help them build a beachhead, and then broaden that beachhead of security in the team. As they become more capable, they'll see more value. And this is something that builds over time. Pose security requirements as product requirements, as product features that bring value. So think about ways of not describing features, security features, as things that are net negative, or the sword of Damocles that's hanging over the development group, that you can't do anything until you've solved this problem, but more as, here's a way to bring more value to your product, and here's how we can describe that value, and help empower your development teams to deliver. So I worked with a gaming company many years back in terms of helping them develop secure conversations between the various different components of their system. And so, I showed them where there were going to be problems if the conversation was insecure, and how that could be exploited. Showed them how to secure that conversation in a way that, how to use cryptography to secure these conversations between two different components, and then wrote some of the code that helped them to do that. And then went on to do some other work with that team, and was very proud of the fact that I was added to an email thread where somebody had said, oh, look, we need to have these other two components talk to each other, and we know how to do that. So let's add this security piece, just like we did over here. And they I was added to the end of that conversation after it had been released, and they were all done with it, and it worked correctly. I got added to that thread, and I thought, well, there's my job, right? I showed them how to do it, and now they've done it on their own without including me. They understand the value of security. They understand how to implement that security. So now they're capable of doing it as well. And, hey, that was a huge success. So if you can have the conversation the way that leads the teams to better, to just include that security on their own, they recognize the problem. They can solve the problem themselves. You've had a big win. And recognize also too that, like, prior to them having recognized this and implemented this feature, they had a security hole. And you could live with that a little bit for a while, because they did have the capability and they recognized it. And so lots of products, in everything, right? So you look at most of the 0 days, and the big things that have occurred in Linux, where the big problem with OpenSSL that was last year, the problem with Heartbleed. Like, you look at all of these things, they're longstanding issues that have been in the product, that are kind of waiting around for people to find them. If we had waited 20 years to release Linux because we hadn't found and fixed all the 0 days in Linux, Linux wouldn't be here. So you still need to get the product out, get feedback on it. So help your teams get the product out the door. Couple of things here. So we talked about DevOps, DevSecOps. So Accelerate is a great book for how to get teams empowered to deliver, how to use automation. The thing about Accelerate is it talks, again, a lot of these tell you what you should do without really telling you how to do that. So the thing on the right there, the DevOps efficiency matrix, gives some guidance in terms of how to recognize whether your DevOps, your DevSecOps environment is efficient or inefficient, and the sorts of things, how you go about improving your efficiency. So the idea is to build a simpler framework that gives you more structured advice on how to go do that. But Accelerate is a great book for reading, as well as the other things that the last author there, Gene Kim, has written. But this book is a great discussion of the capabilities that you need to be able to deliver software. The other book, which I don't think, it's been around for a decade or more now, based on the Microsoft secure development lifecycle, threat modeling, helping your teams. This is not a book that I think the information security teams need to read. This is a book that development teams need to read and understand how to do, threat modeling, how to build data flow diagrams that show where data is moving in your system and where those interfaces are in that data flow diagram, and then how to secure those interfaces. This is a great book for development teams to work with. So working with your development teams, introducing them to this model, introducing them to the STRIDE methodology for evaluating, helps them, gives them it gives them the capability to make value-based judgments on the security features that they need to add in the next product increment. So this is still an excellent book and an excellent approach, even if possibly some of the terminology and so forth is more dated for a decade ago. This is still correct. And so thank you for listening. I am on the Discord if you want to chat on the speaker stream channel. I'll be around for a while. This is kind of a summary of my talk. So I just liked this slide. There are a few more slides, I think, in my presentation. Oh, no, this is the slide. I reordered them at the last minute to cover the two books that I recommended. So I appreciate your time today, and I hope to see you on the Discord channel.